Welcome to the Peace and Possibilities podcast, the best place to learn all about how successful, happy people found work doing what they love. Thanks for listening. Welcome to this week's podcast, everyone. I am talking to Joseph Carr, and Joseph is going to tell you a little bit about his background. He is a successful, I would say, entrepreneur. And the reason I know a little bit even about Joseph's story is because I came across one of the wines in his vineyard, and it's called Josh Wine, and there's a personal story attached to that, and maybe we could get into it later, but I learned a little bit more about it intimately in the last couple of years, and I have nothing but good things to say about that wine and the memory of the name Josh. So I'll just leave it at that, and I'm going to launch it to you, Joseph. So tell us a little bit about your journey to this place. Is probably a lot longer than we can go over right now, but what led you here? Did you know that you would be in this spot in your career when you started off in your early 20s? Let's start with that.
No, absolutely not. The wine business was probably the farthest thing from my mind when I went to college. I'm from upstate New York. I'm not from California. I grew up in a lumber mill town in upstate near the Vermont border, and my father was a lumberjack, and my mom was a bookkeeper in a little tiny general store. And we lived in this lumber mill town. It was probably only 400 people in the town. So it was a very small place, and wine was not part of its culture whatsoever. It was, there was one very tiny liquor store. There were 3 bars and 4 churches. And if you went into the liquor store, you would hear about it at church. That, oh, so-and-so went into the liquor store. Did you see that? You know?
Oh, funny.
So,
that's funny.
No, so I didn't, there were no vineyards in my family, no, nothing like that. And what happened was my twin sister and I were the first in our family to go to college. And I got into college on a wrestling scholarship, and I was going to be a gym teacher. Huh. But before I went to college, I hitchhiked to California. I was 18 years old, and I had long hair, and I made a sign that said California, and I hitchhiked to California. And I brought with me Kerouac's book On the Road and Steinbeck's great novel, Travels with Charlie, and a notebook, which I started to write a book. Then I'm still writing it. It's
At 18, you did this before you went off to college, before you got your,
Correct.
Before you were going to start with your scholarship. Okay.
Yep. Spent the summer, I worked in the lumber mill the previous summers, and I taught swimming lessons, and I was a lifeguard, but most of the things I did, I was in work boots, and so I wanted to see America, and I wound up in San Francisco in July, and somebody said, you should go up to Napa Valley because there's a winery up there. And I didn't know really anything about wine. In my house, you drank milk or water or Canadian whiskey or Genesee cream ale, beer. So that's, to me, it was very foreign. So I hitchhiked up there, and back in that day, 1978, Napa Valley was not what it is today. Today it's a very modern place, big, very expensive wineries, and people with Carr collections and modern art and all that. But in 1978, it was farmers. It was a group of people that I think might be dismissed today as just as immigrants, but they were families that came from Italy and France and Spain, and they brought their culture, the culture of winemaking, the culture of their cuisine, and they were just trying to make a living on a farm growing grapes and chasing this thing called the American Dream. And I met some of these families and had my first glass of Cabernet Sauvignon.
Oh my
And
gosh.
I thought it was the greatest thing ever. And I listened to what they had to say, and then I hitchhiked home, and my dad put me in his pickup truck and took me to college.
Oh my goodness. So what happened? Oh my gosh. So you go to college and you just forgot about that entire trip, or you just were like, did you change courses right then and there, or you just finished college?
No, I didn't. I remembered everything because I wrote everything down. And then I got to school, all prepared to be on the wrestling team and study phys ed and be a gym teacher or a coach. I wanted to be a coach.
Mm-hmm.
And 2 weeks went by, and they dropped the wrestling team, and they dropped the phys ed program.
Huh.
And I'm sitting there going, what do I do now? And, my parents didn't have a lot of money, so I couldn't, I was depending on that scholarship to pay for school, and I really wanted to go to school, but I needed to get a job. So I walked around the town, and there was this French restaurant called the Big Tree Inn. And I kept kind of looking in the window, and inside you could see people that were really nicely dressed, eating and drinking wine by candlelight and being waited on by waiters in tuxedos. And I kind of walked in the restaurant, walked around, looked around, walked out. I did that a couple of times. I never bought anything because I didn't have any money. But I thought, this is good. This is what I should do to make money, because I'm so tired of working, and I'm so tired of driving a truck and working in a mill. I just didn't want to do that. So I went back to my dorm, and I found a girl in my dorm, and I gave her $3, and she cut my hair. I had this really cool long hair, but none of the waiters had long hair, so I figured I wouldn't get the job if I walked in there with long hair. So I got my hair cut, and and I walked into the restaurant, and I went up to the owner, and I said, "My name's Joseph Carr, and I've worked at some of the finest French restaurants in my hometown," which there weren't any.
Oh my gosh.
Not even close. And he kind of laughed at me, he thought, how strange this is, and his wife said to him, "Listen, this kid, he's been coming in the restaurant for the past week. He comes in, walks around, leaves, and he's come back, and he obviously got a haircut. So why don't we give him a shot?" And they made me a busboy.
Oh, funny.
So I didn't really want to be a busboy because the busboys wore vests and the waiters wore tuxedos. And in 1977, I wore a lime green tuxedo with a ruffly shirt and a green velvet bow tie. So I knew I looked pretty good in a tuxedo.
Funny.
And so a couple of weeks go by, and the owners pull me aside and say, "Listen, Joe, we don't know how to tell you this, but you're the worst busboy we've ever hired." Because I didn't know.
Right.
I didn't know how to carry a tray.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I was carrying a tray through the dining room, and people were diving to get out of the way because they were afraid I was going to drop, 10 cups of soup on their head.
Funny.
And so I thought I was going to get fired. And Carol said, "Fred, this kid, he shows up always like a half hour early, and he's the last person to leave, and he always opens the door and pulls out the chair and says, 'Yes, ma'am,' and 'Yes, sir.'" Because that was really the only thing. My parents gave me manners. That's how I was raised, and that's the only thing I really kind of had going for me. That and a blue collar work ethic. So Fred says, "Well, hang on," and he goes in the back, and he gets a wine opener and a bow tie and a book on wine. He says, "You come back Monday, and if you've read the book and you can open the wine, I'll consider giving you a job." So I went home to my dorm, and all my friends were going out to parties to meet girls and drink beer, which is what I really kind of wanted to do. But I sat in the dorm. I knew how to tie the bow tie. I went to Methodist Sunday school, so I knew how to tie a bow tie, but I didn't know how to open a bottle of wine. I thought I could figure it out. And then I sat down and I started to read this book. And this book took me to places like Bordeaux and Burgundy and Florence and Tuscany and Spain and the Moselle Valley of Germany and Napa Valley and Sonoma. And it took me to a lot of places that a kid from a lumber mill town was probably never going to see in his life. And I just fell in love with it, and I read the book twice.
Oh my gosh.
And I came into work on Monday, and Fred says, "What are you doing here?" I said, "Well, I tied the bow tie. I think I can open the bottle of wine." He said, "Did you read the book?" I said, "Yeah, I read the book." And he said, "You read that book?" I said, "Yes, I did, sir." And he goes, "Okay, tell me 3 crus of Beaujolais." And I looked at him and I said, "Morgon, Beaujolais, and Fleuret." And he's like, "Oh my God, I got to give this kid a job."
Wow, of course.
And he went in the back and got me a tuxedo. And I waited tables there and was kind of like the wine captain. And when I was 22, I became the sommelier for Hyatt Regency hotels. And that's how I got in the wine business. And I've been in the wine business ever since.
How did you finish college? Did you stay in that school?
Yeah, I was there for 4 years. Unfortunately, and I studied art. I was studying art and theater and writing, and I studied ballet for 10 years. I became ballet dancer, modern dancer, and worked in a company for a little bit. But I hurt my legs, so I couldn't. That was going to be a short-lived career. And then, unfortunately, I left my senior year. I busted up my leg, and my father was sick, and I just couldn't, study art and justify what I was doing. So I left. It was one of my biggest failures in life. However, I went to Geneseo State University, and many years later, I was invited to sit on the foundation board, which I served for 7 years. And then this past year, I was given an honorary doctorate degree in letters.
So you kind of closed that chapter. It always seems to be like at the very end, when you're almost to the finish line, something changes, and you're for whatever, you didn't need to do that. So it's good that you went back and did it if you regretted doing it. But sometimes people just, they don't need to finish whatever they started. It turned out to be something different. Oh my gosh! And then go ahead.
That happens a lot.
It does
change a lot.
Yeah, almost always.
You can count on that. That's the one thing you can count on in life. The things are going to change, and it's how you handle that change.
For sure. I'm thinking about what
short.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I'm thinking about what you said about your, I'm already picking out that at 18 years old, we're like, I want to do that. I'm going to try it. And then someone told you what you needed to do, and you did the thing they told you to do so that you could get the next thing you wanted. And it's like, you were just like, oh, I have an idea. I'm going to try this. I'm going to go out to California, and then I'm going to come back. I'm going to do this next thing I wanted to do. And then when you saw you were interested in something, you went to figure it out a little bit. So I'm a lot like this too. I just want to see. I just want to go over there. It doesn't mean I'm going to change the course of my life. I just want to see what that's all about. And then I'm going to come back and try something different, or maybe try the thing I was already about to try, and then see where it leads you. And it seems like you were just open to doing that, and then also open to doing the work you needed to do to prove yourself, which is obviously a big component of success, I would say.
Yeah. Yes, I would. Well, I wound up becoming a sommelier, and I worked in New York City and Palm Beach, and a lot of really fancy restaurants and hotels, and wound up back in upstate New York at the Sagamore Hotel, where I won the Wine Spectator Award of Excellence for the restaurant design. And then I quit the wine business. I quit for a year. I went to New York City, and I just wanted to learn. I wanted to understand New York City. I knew what my next step was going to be, but I needed to know New York City. So I kind of slept on someone's sofa for a year and went around the city to art galleries and restaurants and saw theater and stuff like that. And then I went back to work in a restaurant, and that was okay. But I was kind of lost in many ways. And then I was hired by a winery, a wine company that had holdings in Italy and France. And my father put me on the plane to Milan to go to a winery. And I went and did that. And when I came back, the greatest thing that happened to me when I came back is I met my wife. And then my father passed away. And my dad never saw the next 10 years of my life or the winery that I created and named after him, because that was my father's nickname, Josh.
What was his full name or his first name?
Joseph.
Joseph. Okay.
Joseph. But his nickname was Josh. I didn't know that. I'll get to that later. I'll come back to that.
Okay.
So I went and worked for wineries all over the world. And after 10 years, I realized I'd been to all those places I read about in the book. And cool. I got a job with a big Australian wine company. It was the 5th largest wine company in the world, called Mildara Blas. I started at the bottom. I knew I was at the bottom because nobody reported to me. And I just worked hard. And after 4 years, I was 39 years old. I was named president of the company. And I was the youngest and only American to ever have that title. So it was a big job. And I worked, I had to unfortunately move to North Carolina for a year, and I had to commute home. My daughter was a senior in high school, and we agreed we couldn't take her out of school. So I would commute home from Raleigh to upstate New York every weekend. And then I was commuting to Australia every month. And I had a great job, made pretty good money, met Greg Norman, the golfer, and helped create his brand. And I'm sitting on the plane and I'm miserable. I'm the most miserable person you could possibly imagine, because I wasn't seeing my wife. I missed my daughter's prom. I missed the cross country runs. I missed a lot of things in life that you can't get back.
Yep.
So I had an idea of what I wanted to do. I didn't know how to do it. And I lacked two things. I lacked courage and commitment. Those are the two things that I did not have to kind of fulfill this dream. And one day I was sitting in my house in Cape Cod, and my wife was in upstate New York at our house where Kaylin grew up. And it was a Tuesday, and I turned on the television, and the first plane hit the tower. And my friend's wife was on that plane. And then when the plane hit the second tower, I had two friends in that place. And I just sat there stunned. My boss in Australia wanted me to go to LA the following week. And I said, no, I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to stay home with my family.
Yeah.
And I came home and I sat down with Dee, and I opened a bottle of wine, and I told her what I thought the American dream was for me. And that was to start this company with her. And at first, I think she thought I was nuts. I mean, I know she thought I was nuts. And but we drank a bottle of wine. We talked about it and talked about it and talked about it and talked about it. And then at 3 o'clock in the morning, she said, you've been doing this since you were 18. If this is the next chapter in your life, then you really don't have a choice, do you? And I just told her, no, I don't have a choice. I have to do this. So I wrote up a business plan, and I wrote up my resignation to probably the best job I ever had, and flew out to California. I found a winemaker friend of mine and told him what I was going to do, and he was laughing a lot, and then he realized I was serious. And he said, okay, well, you can sleep on the sofa and I'll teach you how to do it. So I went back home and we refinanced our house. We didn't have any business partners. All we had was, just our savings, and started making wine. And it took 2 years and pretty much my life savings to get my first wine produced, which was under the Carr label. And it was a struggle, and the first wines we made, nobody bought. It got to where we had like $5,000 left in the bank, and that's when the tears started and supper table was quiet. And then one day a guy named Eric called me up and he was talking to me about the wines that I was making, because I was making a very different style of wine. I was making more Bordeaux style wines, blends. He goes, "Why are you doing that?" I said, "Well, I grew up working in restaurants. I always drank French wine, so this is the kind of wines I wanted to make in California." And he said, "Well, that's quite unique." And I really didn't think anything of it. And then a month went by, and the New York Times came out with an article about the new hot producers in Napa Valley, written by Eric Asimov, and my name was at the top.
Did you even know he was going to write that article?
I have no idea.
So he just was having a conversation with you and then wrote about it.
Right. Yeah.
And it was at the turning point then? Everyone started buying your wine?
Yes, everyone started buying my wine, and we were doing pretty good. And then the price of grapes doubled, and my biggest wholesaler went bankrupt. So success was killing me. It's very common in business. It happens all the time. Growth if you're not prepared for growth, or you're not prepared for change, you can really get in a lot of trouble. So we were in a lot of trouble. And I went out to California and sat in the kitchen of a guy named Tom Larson, who I just met. I just met him and didn't know him, but he owned a winery and he owned a bottling plant. He owned vineyards, but he was a down-to-earth guy, very, very blue collar, very humble, a lot of fun to hang out with. And we sat in his kitchen and we talked about our dads. Both of our fathers had passed away, and we talked about our fathers, and we laughed a little bit and cried a little bit. And at the end of it, he said, "Joe, I can help you. I know how you can get out of this situation. We just have to make another wine that's a different price point. So just go home and raise some capital and come back, and we'll figure it out." I'm like, "Wow, raise capital. That's the one thing I don't have. I don't know how I'm going to do that."
Yeah.
And I went home and I went to my desk and I pulled out my 401k. It was a little envelope, said Joseph Carr, 401k, $70,000. And that was the rest of my life savings. And I told Dee what I was going to do. And, she looked at me like, she gave me that look like, has he gone off the reservation? Is everything, are all the bells working here? Because she really thought I was nuts. And I said, "No, I think this is it." So I went back and we made this wine. And when we made it, the two of us made it, and it was just great. I loved it. I was so happy with it. But I didn't have a name for it. It didn't have a brand name. I thought I would just figure that out later. And I couldn't come up with anything. I couldn't come up with a thing. And I'm with my 84-year-old mom at the time, and I said, I was with my twin sister too, and I was taking photos of restaurant signs and stuff. I was trying to steal a logo is what I was trying to do. And I told my mom, and she called me a name, which I won't repeat. And she said, "Well, why don't you name it after your father?" And I said, "Well, I've got a brand called Joseph Carr. I can't do that." She was, No. Call it Josh." I was like, "Josh? Who's Josh?" "Josh was your dad." I'm looking at my sister going, what is going on here? Are you telling me something I've never heard of before? And Lisa laughed. And she said, "No, that was Dad's nickname. Dad's nickname was Josh. They called him Josh." And I couldn't understand that. And my mom said, "Your father had a life before children. He used to race stock cars, and he used to raise hell, and his certain amount of friends called him Josh. And I thought, wow, what an opportunity to have a tribute to my dad and a real bridge and a story. So I named it after him. And the writing on the label is modeled after my mother's handwriting.
Ooh.
And I tell a story about my dad.
That's so cool. It's
And the
interesting
first
you
year
were
I made
looking
it.
for something and then it just like kind of landed in your lap. You weren't even expecting for your mom to help you with the
Right.
name. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that happens a lot in life. Things fall in your lap a lot. As much as you try and plan them, again, change happens. But nonetheless, I made 1,000 cases of wine and I sold it out of the back of my truck. I drove around New England and upstate New York and Northern California, and I got a chance to tell people about this wine that we made and how we thought about our dads. And it was probably, for all the times I traveled in Europe in fancy restaurants and hotels and planes, I had more fun driving around this truck and talking about this wine and my father than I ever did in any career I had.
Yeah, because you created it.
Yeah. So the first year we made 1,000 cases, and this year we'll produce over 4 million.
Oh my gosh. How many years ago was that 1,000 cases?
10.
10 years ago.
10 years.
Wow. It's just crazy when you think about what you can create with just one little idea. That was where it starts from, right? People always say you're crazy or how are you going to do that? And you didn't necessarily even know. You even said that. This is what I want to do. I don't know how I'm going to do it. I just know I want to do this. And to have the support of your wife to say, okay, let's figure it out. Let's do it. Everyone always thinks they have to have everything all planned out before they go do something. It's almost never the case. It's just you have an idea and then you just start to go tell people about it and figure it out slowly but surely. It's crazy that you went from 1,000 bottles to 4 million.
Yeah, well, there's a fine line between courage and stupidity, and I was probably on the latter side of that for the most part. I just didn't. I mean, I don't think I could ever do it again, and I think about all the things that happened along the way. It's just pretty crazy, And the Deutsch family came in about 5 years ago and decided they could manage the brand better than I could, which they did, and they since. They told me what could happen, and I didn't believe it. I really didn't. And they said, no, we can do this. We can help you achieve something that you can't even imagine. And they did. And, this past year and a half, we've had 150 million views on social media, average about 1 million a month. I was in Forbes magazine, which I thought was kind of funny because I bought a lot of copies and I sent it to all the girls that broke up with me in high school and college. There were a lot of them.
That's the best. That's the best. Oh my gosh.
But one of the things that I think I didn't touch upon, which I should, is because I know you wanted to know what advice you would give young people. I mean, there's a couple of things that you have to understand. You can go to college and be the top of your class, and you can do all these great things, and everybody's going to tell you how great you are. But then the door is going to close someday, and you're going to face adversity and failure. And I've had more failures and faced more adversity in my life than I ever have had with success. My name's on 36 million bottles of wine, but the adversity that I've had to endure and the failure that I've had to pull myself up from is a whole nother story in itself. Mm-hmm. So you have to figure out how you're going to define yourself, because you can define yourself with success, but more than likely you will define yourself as the first time you face adversity, what you do, or more importantly, the first time you fail, what you choose to do. Because a lot of people can quit. Mm-hmm. A lot of people walk away. A lot of people never get up. I was very lucky. My wife my wife saw me through all that and got me through it all. But,
Yeah, that's super
and I would
important.
also suggest to a young person to find something that they love to do. If they can find something they love to do, and I know it might sound like a cliche, but it's really not. If you find something you love to do, you're going to be a happy person. And if you can find somebody you love, that's going to make what you do and gives you someone to share it with, because that's probably as important as anything.
I'll second that. Yeah, all the success in the world, or all the, money or experiences, I traveled a lot in some of my past jobs, and go to other countries, other cities, domestically and internationally. And it'd be so cool. And I'd come home and try to explain it all to my husband. When you're gone in another country for 7 days, working and seeing and meeting new people, to have to wrap that up and explain it to someone, obviously that's fun to share it back, but not experiencing it with anyone and just having to explain it, it's not the same. So if you just came home every day from your successful job, and or something that you really love, and then sat in your house and had no one to talk to about it, it just takes it deflates the experience. There's not, it's reliving it, the memories and the excitement, and sharing, all of the things you learn from it. That's when you can magnify all the experiences. If you don't have that, it go away pretty quickly.
Yeah, well, I will say that when I used to stay in really fancy hotels, well, I got to stay in fancy hotels again and eat and drink really well. And I'd call my wife and tell her, and she'd remind me that as soon as I came home, I was going to have to clean up the yard because the dog had done a few things out there. We kept humility
Yes.
pretty much in line.
Uh-huh. And it gives you perspective, because if you were never not in a nice hotel and only experienced that, you couldn't appreciate it, because you get numb to it almost. But if you can go back and forth and be in a real life with the dog in a house, and things you need to clean and things you need to keep up with, it makes you really appreciate that fancy hotel and that city that you think you must be in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. This is you have such an interesting story. I wasn't expecting all of that. It's just fascinating to hear where everything goes. Why, when this Deutsche company came in and said they said we can help make you successful. So your reputation and your success in growing this Josh label, they saw and said, we want to come in and help you make it even bigger, magnify it. And that's when you said, oh, okay, like help, and they did. You wanted to go down that path.
Yeah, well, when you start something, you kind of look at the short term, because that's all you can do. You're trying to survive. How do I get through next week? How do I get through next month? How do I get through next year? And then, like any good business person, or even, it doesn't even have to apply to business. You have to think of a succession. What do you want to leave? What is it that you could do? And I realized my daughter, I have a daughter who's an attorney. She's a lawyer. She works for nonprofits. I realized that she wasn't going to go into business because it wasn't her passion. Her passion was something true to her.
Mm-hmm.
And I wouldn't want her to do that. So we needed to say to ourselves, okay, we've done this. Who can take it to the next level? We'll still be part of it, but someone has to take it from here, because otherwise it's all for naught. And one of the things that we were always doing is we were involved in charity work. And I never really liked the word charity or philanthropy. I like the words of helping your neighbor. How can what's my responsibility to my neighbor, my friends, and my family?
Mm-hmm.
If that's the form of a charity, then so be it. So we always worked with the military. We worked with first responders. I've been doing that long before that was a fashion, or even, I didn't even know what the word first responder was. I mean, I grew up across the street from the firehouse in my hometown.
Mm-hmm.
My father was a volunteer fireman. My uncle was a volunteer fireman. My grandfather was a fireman. Other people in my family were EMTs. I mean, when you grow up in a small place, you take care of your neighbors and your family. You have to, because there's no professional services.
Yeah.
So we were always involved in these endeavors on some level. And when the Deutsches came to me and told me their vision, all I could think was, well, if they're on the same page as me, then my goodness, we could perhaps really impact neighborhoods and communities and other people's lives. And they've partnered with time and time again, whether it's Food Bank in Philadelphia or it's Operation Gratitude, which writes letters to men and women who are serving in country, or the Gary Sinise Foundation that creates smart homes for veterans that are become quadriplegic during service. I mean, a week doesn't go by that we haven't had a chance to be part of people's lives, and not just from a wine perspective, but a tangible perspective. And that, to me, that's why we wanted to do this partnership, and because that was something that would last longer than us.
Yeah, I didn't catch the last word you said, but I that's awesome that you weren't just, here's our business and we have good lives and we could just keep running it this way, or we can really take it to the next level and impact so many more people that are, close to your hearts. These charities, like you said, these philanthropic missions, it's awesome. Everyone has things that are close to their hearts, and yours obviously usually come from an organic place like that, related to something that you grew up. And it's awesome that I didn't know that. That's awesome. The guy I was telling you about earlier, our friend Josh, he was actually in the Marines. Yeah, I didn't know. That's pretty cool that that's close to your heart too. That's awesome. And it makes being successful even more appealing. And I think especially with kids younger. So I know you have a daughter. I have boys that are, one's in his early 20s, another teenager, and they're not just interested in going and making money. Of course, they want to be successful and have good lives and stuff, but they see everything, how things have changed in our culture, and how giving back, how important that is, and how much more fulfilled your life can be when you do that. So I think especially them seeing business as a way to do that is so, it's way more impactful is not the right word, but it's something that wasn't the case when I was in my 20s. And we were just work hard, you go do your thing. It was a lot different. We didn't have all the technology we have today, but there's so much more that can be done. And I think that generation definitely is the one to start having a bigger impact.
Well, I think I can only make this analogy because we grew up, we didn't have a lot of money. Okay. But, every weekend there was a bake sale. Somebody was doing a bake sale. So we couldn't write a check to a charity or a family, but we could bake cookies, and that's where I think I learned the core of what we call philanthropy now is you're just helping your neighbors in some small way. Now, granted, it can build something significant and tangible, but where I came from, you had a bake sale or a rummage sale, and that money was going to go to the church, or was going to go help somebody build a barn that burned down, or was going to help some kid go to college. I mean, those were things that we all wanted to be part of, because when we came home at night, that's something that we could say, hey, this is what we did this week. Not that we finished the quarter strong, or we got this amount of profit. We always we never talked about those things. We never talked about those things at the supper table, with my wife and kid. I mean, we talked a little bit about money, but because we needed it to keep our business going. But we were able to talk about, hey, we just did a program with a wholesaler in Philadelphia that's going to ensure that food bank is going to get something every week for the next 2 years. I mean, that's a conversation. That's a real conversation.
And it sounds like your daughter got that, just being, like you said, she's an attorney for nonprofits. So you guys obviously instilled that in her growing up, and being the doers and not just talking about the right thing to do, but actually watching you do it, which obviously you probably as a parent is the most important. They do what you do and model what you do, not what you say. Yeah. So final question for you, Joseph. If you had big, long journey for you, and obviously it went in all these different ways, and it's never a straight line. It's always this, curvy kind of journey. Looking back, not about having regrets, but is there anything you regret not doing sooner, or something you wish you'd learned a little bit earlier, and it maybe would have paved a different path or sped you up to where you are now sooner?
Well, I wish I'd taken a business course in college. I guess I probably wouldn't have made the mistakes that I made along the way, because I made several that cost me a bunch of money and set me back. But I didn't take those classes. When I was named president of that company, I ran to the library and bought Harvard Business School MBA to understand what a budget was and what a balance sheet was, and I didn't know any of that stuff. I knew how to bring people together and get them all on the same page, but I knew nothing about finance or anything like that. So, but other than that, no, I don't really have too many regrets. I mean, my life has been a crazy journey, and I guess I'm pretty well known in the wine business now, and also in outside of the wine business. The irony of success is, a year and a half ago, my wife passed away of cancer. So I'm sitting in a big house here thinking, what's the next step in life? And I haven't figured that out yet, but I will. Because things will change, as I said they would in the beginning.
Wow. I'm glad you had all of that. I'm glad you had a wonderful spouse to support you through all of this, and it sounds like she was just what you needed on this journey, so that you could live your dream, and she got to see you live it, and you lived it with her.
Yep. I'm very
awesome.
Fortunate.
Oh, that's awesome.
All right.
Thank you so much for joining me and for all your wisdom and your stories. It's been really cool to talk to you. And I can't wait to hear more about what you do with your, all of these efforts with military and first responders. I think that's awesome. And it's just one more reason to
go on Operation Gratitude. That's the one you should check out right now. I'm going to LA in a couple of weeks to present a big check that everybody helped put together. I didn't put it all together. It was just hundreds and thousands of people that came together to donate and do this thing, because it's an awesome endeavor. So,
Operation Gratitude.
Thank you very much.
I love that. Thank you. That's one of my favorite things to talk about for my workshops is gratitude. So that's perfect. And if anyone wants to find out a little bit more about your wine, where can they go?
For me, you go to joshcellars.com or josephcarrwine.com, or if you really want to dig in deep, you can go onto my Facebook page, which is Joseph Carr, because the book that I'm working on is parts of it are on that page. It's about my journey.
Cool. I can't wait to see that when it's finally finished. It's awesome.
All right.
Thank you
Good luck.
so much.
Yeah.
Take care, Joseph.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening. If you love this content, please rate us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts or whichever platform you found us on. You can get all my social media links in the description below. Help us keep the momentum going so that